Tell me if you've heard this one. USAID has been propping up sites like Politico, giving them $8 million in taxpayer funds in just one fiscal year, meaning that Politico is state-funded media stealing from you, the taxpayer. Except that isn't really accurate, and the truth, it turns out, is much less sinister. So let's walk through it. This whole debacle, it started when Politico was late with the payroll this week. And that, thanks to what they said, was a technical error that was resolved by the end of the day, so everyone got paid. But then what we saw is that with that, you had posts including screenshots from a government website tracking federal spending showing that Politico received $8 million from the government in the 2024 fiscal year, with former Fox News producer Kyle Becker sharing these screenshots and saying, fun fact, Politico received USAID funds, or seemingly claiming that the $8 million came from USAID alone. And then, in a follow-up post, he connected Politico's late payroll with the recent crackdowns on USAID's spending, right, pointing to the report and then adding, the technical error was reportedly resolved. The error of sending US taxpayer money to a biased, partisan establishment publication, however, is being fixed. And about half an hour later, another post went viral, with this one coming from conservative commentator Benny Johnson, who claimed Politico was being massively funded by USAID. With this then even saying the White House press secretary addressing the situation.
I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than 8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOJ team is working on canceling those payments now.
And from there, the situation just exploded, with big names on the right chiming in and spreading this far and wide. For example, Elon Musk sharing posts supporting the idea that USAID is spending millions on sites like Politico and saying, not an efficient use of taxpayer funds, this wasteful expenditure will be deleted. And even had Trump on Truth Social this morning saying that billions had been stolen from federal agencies like USAID and gone to, quote, fake news media as a payroll for creating good stories about the Democrats, and then adding, this could be the biggest scandal of them all, perhaps the biggest in history. Even had Dana Lash calling for protests outside the Politico offices. But then, with all this, there's been a whole lot of pushback against this narrative. With, for example, the Washington Post pointing out that if you look deeper into the government spending website, you'll see that USAID gave Politico only $44,000 during the fiscal years of 2023 and 2024, right? And that was reportedly for subscriptions to an energy and environment publication that the company produces. And then that $8 million, right, the amount the entire government spent on Politico last year, most of that reportedly came from contracts from subscriptions to their premium services. In fact, you had the Post reporting that just days ago, the White House's Office of the National Cyber Director signed a $35,000 contract for a Politico Pro premium subscription for 15 users, or with that service tracking, analyzing, and providing updates on the entire public policy landscape. With journalist Isaac Saul explaining it this way, Politico Pro does not equal Politico, the news website you guys read. Politico Pro is a collection of trade publications and also a dashboard used to track legislation, lobbying, elections, etc. It is very valuable, which is why Politico was bought for $1 billion. And saying these subscriptions cost north of $10,000. Private sector CEOs and lobbyists pay for them, as do government workers. They are amazing tools for keeping an eye on the government. And writing, Politico sells these premium trade pubs to agencies. Government agencies like the private sector want to work on the best info available. They, meaning CEOs and private corporations and the government, wouldn't pay if Politico wasn't providing value. And even adding, a bunch of conservative writers who work at subscription-based publications are claiming this is some conflict of interest, yet they all write articles every day about people who subscribe to their work. Right? And so like he mentioned, a lot of offices for members of Congress subscribe to Politico Pro. I mean, for example, the Post reports that committees led by Republicans dropped $500,000 on Politico subscriptions in the first 9 months of last year, with 38 Republicans in the House reportedly spending $300,000 for subscriptions within the same time period. And so you had people like Lauren Boebert saying Elon's now exposing Politico's grift. Others were quick to point out, hey Boebert, your office literally uses this service. In fact, according to government disclosures, last year she spent $7,150 on Politico Pro. And this is Politico's leadership said in a memo to their staff that they have never received government funding outside of subscriptions, saying Politico has never been a beneficiary of government programs or subsidies, not 1 cent ever in 18 years. Later saying the same thing in a note to readers and adding, government agencies that subscribe do so through standard public procurement processes, just like any other tool they buy to work smarter and be more efficient. This is not funding, it is a transaction. Just as the government buys research, equipment, software, and industry reports. And going on to say some online voices are deliberately spreading falsehoods. Let's be clear, Politico has no financial dependence on the government and no hidden agenda. We cover politics and policy. That's our job. But also, a very big thing is that this isn't just limited to Politico. As this has gotten more attention, other outlets have been drawn into the conversation. Or you had the Associated Press, who said that both Republican and Democratic administrations have been subscribers to their platform, and adding, it licenses licenses AP's nonpartisan journalism just like thousands of news outlets and customers around the world, and adding it's quite common for governments to have contracts with news organizations for their content. And those working with AP were quick to come to Politico's defense, with an investigative reporter with the AP saying on X, "I looked at these contracts and I have my own fun fact. This is occurring because agencies, not just USAID, are buying subscriptions to Politico's pro-editorial product, not because Politico is getting grants or other federal funding." And then separately, you had the BBC saying in a statement that its international development charity had been affected by the pause in US funding, but noting there that this charity is completely separate from BBC News and wholly reliant on its donors and supporters to carry out our work, with them adding, BBC Media Action supports local media around the world to deliver trusted information to people most in need. But also, misinformation regarding where government funding is going, it doesn't stop with media outlets. With seeing, for example, notably Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently being accused of getting kickbacks from USAID on X, with some people saying that her net worth was around $30 million on a $174,000 salary, to which she then responded, "My filings are public. I loathe corruption and your lying is disgusting." Right? And saying that her net worth is nowhere near as high as $30 million or even $500,000, which yes, is in fact backed up by her financial disclosure forms from last year. And then, you have things like Bernie Sanders. He was recently accused by RFK Jr. of being bought and paid for by Big Pharma, or with him accusing him of, quote, accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry and protecting their interests. But the numbers that RFK Jr. was citing there were seriously misrepresented. In fact, Bernie actually received that money from everyday workers. Right? This wasn't corporate lobbyist money. This was money from regular people working within the pharmaceutical field, which is why it was labeled as such on the site that RFK Jr. was using as a basis for his claim. With Bernie having to note on X after the fact, 0 donations from pharma CEOs, 0 donations from Wall Street CEOs, 0 donations from oil company CEOs. $8 million from working people giving $27 at a time. I am very proud of that fact. And unfortunately, there is no shortage of constant spewing of misinformation out there. I mean, last week, for example, you had the rumor spreading that the US was spending a truly absurd amount of money on condoms for Palestine, with even the White House press secretary specifically claiming during her debut press briefing that DOJ and the OMB found that, quote, there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza, with then Trump repeating that claim the next day and going even further, saying that his administration had, quote, identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. But of course, no evidence was given to back up those claims. And as we've seen in so many of these cases, and as many are trying to quickly point out, but nothing can really move at the speed of lies or misrepresentations, this simply appears to be, at the very least, a misunderstanding. With seeing the president of Refugees International writing on X, USAID procures condoms for around 5 cents a piece. 50 million would be 1 billion condoms. What's going on here is not a billion condoms for Gaza. What's going on is that the bros at DOJ apparently can't read government spreadsheets. And with that, we know that USAID was spending way less than $50 million on condoms worldwide, let alone in just one place. Right? In 2023, for example, it spent around $7 million on male condoms and $1 million on female condoms, overwhelmingly to African countries. With us also seeing reporting that a federal report published last year showed that USAID did not provide or fund any condoms in the entire Middle East in 2021, 2022, or 2023 fiscal years. And so when looking closely, it seems that Trump and his team may have been referring to around $100 million awarded to a group called the International Medical Corps, or IMC, right, to provide medical and trauma services in Gaza. With those services including family planning programming, which includes emergency contraception, sexual health care, including prevention and management of STIs, and adolescent sexual and reproductive health. But also, notably, with the Trump administration freezing that aid, you had the IMC stating that in the end, quote, no US government funding was used to procure or distribute condoms, nor provide family planning services. And overall here, right, the problem is that in a time where everything appears to be happening all at once, so many lies, misleading statements, whether it be knowingly or unknowingly, or just misunderstandings, are being spread. And it is to such a degree, the stuff we covered today is just the tip of the iceberg, that it feels like we are going even further out to sea, that we are miles and miles further away from altogether being at least connected to a base core reality. But yeah, that's the story, a little bit of my opinion. Of course, I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also, a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil, or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil, or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.